Yeah, Michelle and Preston, the aviation experts we talked to said these close calls on the runway, they're getting closer and more frequent. And they're now testing out a new technology that would essentially give pilots a quicker warning when there's an impending collision. It's a technology the NTSB wants to see implemented across the board. They say it will protect pilots and passengers. You may not see it yet, but this flight is on a collision course at the Yakima airport.
Traffic on runway.
Another plane has just pulled onto the runway, but this alarm alerts pilot Joe Duvall of the closing danger. He's able to pull up and avoid a disaster.
Traffic on runway.
This was a test flight, simulating what has become too common on U.S. runways.
Our safety system is showing clear signs of strain that we cannot ignore.
The NTSB has warned about several close calls with commercial jets, including this near miss in Austin, Texas, when two flights came within 170 feet of colliding, and at JFK in New York, where an American flight pulled in front of a Delta plane that had just been cleared for takeoff.
It only takes one missed warning to become a tragedy, one incorrect response to destroy public confidence in a system that has been built over decades.
In an accident report just released on the JFK incident, the NTSB again recommended technology to, quote, provide visual and oral alerts to flight crews of traffic on a runway. It's exactly what Joe Duvall had here in Yakima.
So that third set of eyes kind of does know better than you might.
Duvall flies for Honeywell Aerospace Technologies, which is working to get their Surf-A alert system certified by the FAA. Honeywell estimates Surf-A could have alerted the pilots of the JFK incident 12 seconds sooner than air traffic controllers. When there's a potential runway incursion, 12 seconds, how much of a difference does that make?
It's dramatic, especially on the takeoff portion, because you're accelerating for takeoff.
It can help get the message to a pilot sooner.
Thea Farazin is a senior technical fellow on Honeywell's project.
We're seeing trends of near misses getting nearer and nearer, where it's merely seconds away from a potential collision.
The consequences of a runway collision can be catastrophic, which is what we saw in Tokyo when an inbound Airbus A350 collided with a Coast Guard plane that crossed in front of it. This is the exact scenario Farazin says systems like what we saw here in Yakima can prevent.
It's the difference between life and death. The sooner we can give the pilot an alert that there is a potential collision, the more time the pilot has to process that information.
The next step in the process for implementing a technology like the one that we saw demonstrated on the Honeywell flight is for the FAA to actually certify it. Honeywell says they hope that will happen sometime in the next 18 months. From there, though, it's going to be up to the airlines and airplane makers to decide whether or not they want to implement this technology on board their aircraft. And that's going to come at a cost, something that they're going to have to weigh the benefit and the potential safety improvements to their aircraft over the potential costs. Reporting live from Boeing Field, Jeremy Harris, KOMO News.
Tonight, we're looking into the new technology that could help prevent planes from colliding on runways. We've heard warnings from the NTSB about several close calls between aircrafts over the last few years. Michelle Esteban talked with Jeremy Harris tonight about how the technology works and the next steps that need to happen to get this potentially life-saving technology in the cockpit.
All right, Jeremy Harris joining me now. Jeremy, thanks so much. You really got a firsthand look at something that really might make a difference with regard to safety and air travel. Fill me in on this new system that you're talking about that the NTSB really likes what they see.
Well, they do. And, you know, this is really to solve a critical issue in terms of runway collisions and very close calls that we've seen on runways across the country. You know, what we're seeing right now is a huge surge in air travel. There's more flights going out. There are restrictions on how many runways we have, how many flights can leave on these runways. So there's more demand on the air system. And what is alarming to aviation experts is the fact that they are seeing an increase in these serious runway incursions. And that means one plane pulls in front of another, or a car pulls in front of a plane as it's going down, something that's not supposed to be on that runway. So this new system that was just tested here in Washington, the NTSB is recommending systems like this, and the FAA is looking into a potential certification process. What it does is essentially it alerts the pilots and says, hey, we're tracking not only where your airplane is, but we're also tracking where the other planes are that are on the runway, that are out in that airfield, and we may have a potential collision. Now, you may think, well, this sounds like a simple technology, but it is not something that's currently available on airplanes right now. And so this is why they're trying to get this tested, get it certified. We got to see how it worked firsthand. And I have to tell you, it was very impressive to see. We were out in Yakima, and we were landing on the runway there, and there was another plane there. And the flight that we were on, it gave a visual and an audible alarm to the pilots and said, you have traffic on the runway. And from there, the pilots get to make a decision about the best way to avoid a conflict.
You know, I would think that seconds are everything, right? When you're on the runway, and when you talked about it, there's just so much more air traffic than there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So the potential is there. Talk to me just about how critical those seconds can be, and just how quickly this type of system, if it is in place, would work and would give pilots and the crew a heads up.
Well, let's take the example of what happened at JFK Airport in 2023 January, which the NTSB just today released their report about. In that case, you had a Delta plane that was lined up, ready to take off, and an American Airlines plane without authorization. They were confused as to where they were on the airfield, crossed right in front of the path of that Delta jet. Now, thankfully, the air traffic controller got an alert and immediately canceled the takeoff clearance for that Delta jet. If that hadn't happened, there could have been a potential collision on that runway, and there could have potentially been hundreds of fatalities. We've seen these runway disasters before, including here in the United States. They are very violent and they are very destructive, and they end up killing a lot of people when these jets smash into each other. So in the JFK case, thankfully, the air traffic controller got that warning. Now, Honeywell, the manufacturer of this new Surf A system that we saw demonstrated that we did our story about, they told me that they could have alerted the pilots in those planes 12 seconds sooner than air traffic control. So you talk about a difference of 12 seconds. When you're a pilot and you're punch and go on that runway, how much of a difference can 12 seconds make when you have to make a split-second decision and power down and cancel your takeoff or get off the ground faster depending on where you are? 12 seconds could mean the difference between life and death.
Thanks for keeping us posted, Jeremy Harris. Great to have you here. Have a good one.